Wherever you are in the time zone of this world, we have people from all over the world who are watching, and I am here with Coach Jen to talk about moving beyond overfunctioning. What does overfunctioning look like? So if you are live with us, could you give us a shout out? Because you know the very first thing I like to do is say hello, and I don't like to talk to myself. And so I'm sitting here at my dining room table, I'm all by my lonesome, and Jen's here. Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much for letting me know that you're here, letting us know that you're joining us. And we sure there are other women out there in cyberland who are going to join us as well. We've been doing a series of these Facebook Lives just to kind of touch base with you again and educate you and invite you to a challenge that we're going to be doing in 2 weeks on moving beyond some obstacles. But one of my passions in life, and I know Jen's is too, is helping Christian women learn to be healthy and strong women of God, instead of feeling so driven by fear and worry and insecurity and not good enough syndrome. And one of the ways that we deal with this feeling of not good enough or am I worth something is we tend to overfunction. We tend to take responsibility for things that are not ours to take. And we call that in our world overfunctioning. So how many of you would give us a definition? Jen and I were talking about this before our live started, and we said, what's the difference between overfunctioning and people pleasing? So if anybody would love to put in the chat what you think the difference between being an overfunctioner as a woman and being a people pleaser as a woman, what do you think it is? And just as you're thinking about the answer to that, I just want to give you a little bit of a warning that this is my public Facebook page. And so we just want to make sure that you're safe and that nothing you write on the chat will come back to bite you. And so not that my Facebook page gets a lot of views from people who aren't supposed to be here, but it could. Like your mother-in-law could show up. And if you say something negative about your family members, or your kid could read it, or somebody else could read it that you didn't anticipate, your pastor's wife could be showing up, or your pastor, who knows, because it's public. And so this is my public Facebook page, and my newsletter and things like that go out to all kinds of people, thousands and thousands of people all over the world. So whoever wants to show up for this can show up. So we just want to give you fair warning that anything that you say is public and it's not private. And so it's better if there's going to be something personal that you ask it in the form of a question about somebody else. That's always safer to say, hey, I have a friend who has this problem and I wonder what you would say to her. And that way nobody knows for sure who you're talking about. All right. Okay, so we have people from Ireland, we have people from California, North Carolina, Indiana. So Connie has put in a definition: overfunctioning is covering for others to protect their image. Okay, people pleasing is the attitude behind our overfunctioning, Sherry says. Well, that's interesting. And then Kathleen says, overfunctioning means you take on a lot of responsibility out of habit. People pleasing is trying to keep others happy. Yeah, I think sometimes we overfunction in order to please people, all of the above. Katie, maybe overfunctioning, we are taking on tasks less to please others and more to feel good about ourselves because we think other people can't do it as well. Mm-hmm. Wow, you guys don't need us. You guys rock.
People and that's a wrap.
Yeah, and that's a wrap. People pleasing is people focused, while overfunctioning could be self-detrimental by pushing and pushing even when on a low battery. Yeah, and even people pleasing can be pushing and pushing on a low battery. So you've got it down. I think that there's all of the above. And so we just want to talk about the pros and cons because sometimes as women, we need to overfunction. We need to overfunction sometimes because like my sister's husband just had a massive heart attack. Well, this whole 2 weeks, she's overfunctioning, right? She has to. She has to care for her husband. She's got to make sure her dog's okay. She's got to take care of herself. She's overfunctioning for a season because the people in her life, her husband, can't function at all, right? He's in intensive care. So there's a season sometimes where we have to really step up and do more than normally is our responsibility to do. And I think that's a good thing. I think that God calls us sometimes to care for an aging parent or care for a neighbor who's having a problem or extend ourselves in the service of the unfortunate. And that's a good thing. That's part of our giving nature. That's part of who God calls us to be. So when is it a good thing to be a people pleaser? This is our second question. When is it a good thing? When is it a godly quality to be a giver and not resentful? Like my sister's not resentful that she had to put her agenda aside and take care of her husband and his needs. She wasn't resentful of that. She was lovingly doing that, right? Because that's what you do when you love. You don't resent that. What's the difference between a healthy people pleaser? So I'm doing this Facebook Live. I want to please you. I want to make you happy. I want to give you good information that will help you grow. I hope you're pleased, right? What's the difference between someone who gives and wants to please or overfunctions in a season of need? What's the difference between that healthy part of us and what's the unhealthy part of it? Let's see what we get in the chat there. Yeah. What's the unhealthy? All right. People pleasing in a healthy way is being helpful, while overfunctioning, enabling is doing for others what they can do for themselves. Okay. Let's see. So people can solve their own problems. We're overfunctioning. So that's the unhealthy element of overfunctioning, right? So when we're doing something, whether it's for our children or for our husband or for our loved ones, that they really should be taking the responsibility of doing for themselves, because they're not in crisis, they're not sick, they're not disabled, they're not ill-equipped, right? So you're doing something that someone should be doing for themselves by now, right? By now. And so if you were spoon feeding your child at age 5, unless that child was disabled, you're doing something for them that they should be doing for themselves. If you're brushing your teenager's teeth, you're doing something that they should be doing for themselves. If you're doing your teenager's homework or even your middle schooler's homework, you're doing something for them that they should be doing for themselves. And you're actually robbing them of the opportunity to build muscles that they need to grow into a mature, healthy adult themselves, right? So overfunctioning in an unhealthy way is not just stepping in a crisis. It's doing something for someone who's capable of doing it for themselves. Any other part of that, Jen, that you would define as unhealthy?
No, yeah, I love that. It's that feeling of being drained. And I know we can go, and not even realize we're functioning at that high level. And then all of a sudden we crash. And then that's where the resentment comes in. It can turn just like that. And I think that's, if anyone's able to recognize the drain as it's starting to happen, as opposed to by the time it gets to the crash, that's even better. And that's part of what we are talking about, is how to recognize the difference and when it's happening, because that's the real downside to this. It's catabolic. It's going to break us down physically, emotionally, spiritually.
I think overfunctioning happens too when we have this story inside of our head that I have to make it all happen. Like, I know that for me, like, I got into overfunctioning around Christmas time. Like, I had to make Christmas the Norman Rockwell Christmas of the ages for my parents and his mom and our kids and him. And, and I knocked myself out, exhausted, resentful, hated Christmas, because by the time Christmas came, I was full of, resentment and exhaustion. And that was all a story in my head that I had to have it this way. I had to make it happen this way. And so I took on more than anyone was asking me to take on, but I was taking it on because of a story and a myth in my mind that nobody would be happy with just an ordinary Christmas. It had to be an extraordinary Christmas. And I had to do it all in order for them to be happy. And none of that was true. But sometimes we overfunction in an unhealthy way because of some kind of crazy story we're telling ourselves. Our house has to be clean all the time. And if someone comes and sees us and our house isn't clean, we're going to look like we're lazy, or we're not, Betty Crocker or whoever she is who keeps her house clean. And so I think sometimes we overfunction, not because anybody's expecting us to, but us. We have these unrealistic expectations of ourselves. Overfunctioning, even in a conversation, Brenda says this, I think this is very insightful, isn't letting the other person be responsible for not being comfortable in the uncomfortable silence. Yeah, how many of you I have a friend who I could just hold the phone and she could keep the whole conversation going all by herself for 10 minutes without me saying a word. I'm a pretty good listener, but I think that's a little bit overfunctioning. Like, she's not comfortable with the uncomfortable silence. If she asks me a question, I think for a while to answer, she's going to go on and talk in between that time. And so I think that is a really great insight. Yeah. And, so unhealthy overfunctioning is what drives unhealthy people pleasing? Because again, it's not a bad thing to people please. It's not a bad thing to want to make people happy. I think that's a good thing. When does it fall into the unhealthy thing? Because this is the mistake that Christian women make, and Christian men, is they divide everything into this is good and this is bad. So if you say no, oh, that's bad, you're being selfish. When in fact, that may be healthy. right? Or if you say, yes, of course I'll help you. Of course I want to please you. Of course I'll make you happy. Of course I'll do what you want. Well, that's always good. That's not always good, right? And so we have to look behind the action. Why are we doing what we're doing? So give us some ideas from the chat what you think are unhealthy people-pleasing motivations. Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing what I'm doing? All right, Suzanne said it well. When it sucks the life out of your soul, that is a good warning sign, right? That you're resentful, that you're angry, that you're exhausted, that you're depleted. Those are red flags that maybe you're doing something that God isn't asking you to do, but you're being driven by another motive, right? What might that motive be? To not hear complaining. Yeah. So if you don't do what someone wants, if you don't always overfunction and maybe do all your kids' laundry or have dinner every night or, do exactly what your husband wants, he might complain. And if he complained, what would that mean? Because he might complain, right? So if he complained, and here's the next piece of it. If someone complains, why didn't you get the laundry done? Why don't we have dinner tonight? What happens to us when someone complains, right? Out of a fear of rejection or any other fear. Yeah. So if someone complains, we're making that a story about us. Oh, I did something wrong. I did something bad. Maybe not. Maybe you did something perfectly right. No, you can complain that I didn't do your wash. It's your job to do your wash, right? And if they complain, it's not a statement about your worth or value, like I'm not doing my job or I'm not a good mother, unless you let it be a statement about that. You see, this is your work to do. Any thoughts about that, Jim?
Yeah, I'm seeing some of these comments and listening to you speak. And I just remember when I had my light bulb moment about my people pleasing being more over functioning. And it was so freeing when I got to the root of what was really driving behind it. So, I mean, some of you guys know my story about my husband's betrayal, but that was just that's not even what this is about. That just put a spotlight on all of the things in the areas that God was exposing to me that I can grow from. And I was so afraid of, I think someone just said, fear of rejection. I wanted to be loved. So if I was Martha Stewart on steroids, because that's what people used to tease me and call me. If I was Martha Stewart on steroids, I felt like, well, my house is beautiful. Like your background, Leslie, I always love it. It's just like, I would want to create that environment for someone to walk into and they would have to love me, right? If it's perfect, like on TV. And it turns out that's not the case. I can't control if someone else loves me or not.
Yeah.
And so now I just appreciate that if you come over to my house, it's because you want to see me and you don't care if it's messy in the background or not, because you're here for me. And that was a huge shift. Do I still like things clean and organized? Absolutely. But it's not driving me for that anymore because I've reconciled what was going on in here and with him. That was the big shift.
I remember my wake up moment, and it wasn't so much, my Christmas thing was my wake up moment for overfunctioning because I was so cranky. I'm thinking, I don't want to show up for Christmas morning cranky. But I was up all night wrapping 50 million presents. I had been, burning the midnight oil, making sure that, kids got videoed for the grandparents, and we put up a Christmas tree that went up to the ceiling and chopped it down ourselves and made homemade ornaments and a baby Jesus cake. And I was like done, I was so done with overfunctioning that I just didn't show up for Christmas like I wanted to. And it was like that wake up moment for me. Is this really necessary or worth it? And so we had this come to Jesus moment with our family, like, what's really important for you for Christmas? And none of that was important to anybody but me. Like we bought an artificial tree the next year and nobody had a bad Christmas, right? We didn't have to cut down the tree and have it 15 feet high and create ornaments from scratch. It was fine to just put up the ornaments we had and keep it simple. But my people-pleasing moment came in a very hard way. My husband and I went out to dinner with a couple, and I was counseling at the time. So I thought I knew better. I thought I was smart enough. Like I knew how to say no. It's not like I didn't have assertiveness skills. I did. But we went out to dinner with a couple, and they drove, and it was about an hour away, and he drank during dinner. The other person, not my husband, but the other person drank 3 something Long Island iced teas or something that was liquor in it. And, I might have a glass of wine or something, but I don't drink cocktails. And all of a sudden I'm like, is he competent to drive home? Now, he didn't seem obviously intoxicated, but 3 alcoholic drinks is, I think, something that might give you blood alcohol level that may cost you a ticket or something. So he gets in the car to drive home. And my husband are like looking at each other like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Are we going to speak up and say, could your wife drive? Or how about one of us drives home? You've had 3 drinks. And none of us said a word, not because we didn't know how. I knew how, but I was afraid to. Why? Because I was afraid he would think I was judgmental, that I was being, critical, that I was, didn't trust him. All those, fear of man. It was the fear of man that was a snare. And I remember sitting in the back seat with my husband driving all the way home thinking, I am going to be so mad at myself if we kill somebody in this car because I was too afraid to speak up. I mean, that was like my wake up call, this thing. I will never put myself in this situation again. I will never want to make someone happy at my own expense, at my own danger levels, at hurting someone else. And it was such a powerful, like, what is wrong with me that I am so afraid of upsetting him that I would rather leave my children and grandchildren orphans, right? I mean, and he didn't drive crazy or any of those kind of things, but he could have. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what is wrong here? And I think sometimes we have those wake up moments as women to say, why am I so anxious about this person's approval? Why can't I just say, no, I don't like that, or no, that's not okay with me?
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, that's a very serious one. Mine's a little lighter. Mine was for my wedding when I was just so over the top wanting to please the bridesmaids and whatever that I totally almost completely didn't get what I wanted for my own wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, kind of like the Christmas day, I wanted it all to be perfect and all of this sort of stuff. And because I was afraid, what if they had to spend too much money on a dress? So they got dresses that I don't think any of us ended up really liking. And it was just all of these cutting corners because I thought I was overcompensating and pleasing for others. And I don't think anyone ended up being totally happy with it. I know it's a wedding and it's whatever, but that was one of my there was a time where I was allowed to step up and be the bridezilla if I had wanted to be and say, this is what I want. And I was too afraid to do it. I don't know why.
Yeah. So this is really important. So we want to invite you. We'll answer some questions about people pleasing or overfunctioning. Really, we're talking about overfunctioning today because there's a little bit of a difference. Our people pleasing is we do it out of fear of someone's disapproval or fear of their anger, fear of their disappointment in us or criticism or complaining. Overfunctioning, we do it because we want it our way. We think we have to do it all. We have this mindset in that they can't function if I don't do it. It won't happen if I don't do it. And maybe it's not all that important to anybody else if it happens at all, right? But there's a little bit of a different mindset in overfunctioning. There is an overlap, but there's a little bit of a different mindset. So in the overfunctioning, you tend to have more of a superior attitude. Like, I know how to be the hero of your story. I know how to fix this. Let me take over. And in the people pleasing, you feel more of the lesser. I have to do this in order for you to approve of me. I have to do this in order for you to love me. There's a little bit of a different position of the person in that role when you're functioning in one or the other. So be careful of that. But I want to invite you to participate with Jen and all of my other coaches and me on a 5-day challenge. How many of you are ready to kind of get a jump start on the second half of 2022? Okay. Yeah, I am. I just got back from Israel and it was a wonderful trip, and the Lord and I had some wonderful conversations, and I think I've been a little lazy since COVID. I've just been a little, just a little apathetic or a little bit, you just kind of get out of some of the rhythms that you were in. And now that things are opening up and you're having a little bit more freedom, I've got to get a jump start back on some of the goals that I had and some of the things that I want my life to look like and some of the things that maybe I've gotten lazy at. I had some really, really good eating habits for 2 years, and I've been eating my ice cream again every night and all that stuff that I don't want to do. And so I just have to get a hold of that again and get back to my disciplined routine. Not perfect, but better than it is. And so we're going to do a challenge. It's called Moving Beyond Challenge. And we're going to take 5 days, June 20th, June 21st, June 22nd, June 23rd and June 24th. So Monday through Friday. Not next week, but the week after. And we're going to tackle 5 things. First, we're going to talk about move beyond overwhelm. How many of you feel that overwhelm? Like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. There's so much in my head. I am feeling so many different feelings and I don't know how to manage them. And so we're going to talk about how do we move beyond overwhelm on day 1. If you sign up for this challenge, and I'll share with you how to sign up in just a second. If you sign up for this challenge, and you have to sign up in order to be a part, all right? You're going to get an email Monday morning saying, hey, you want to move beyond overwhelm? Here's what overwhelm does to you. If you don't tackle it, it will tackle you. It will lay you flat. It'll paralyze you because you're overwhelmed and you don't know where to start. And so here's how to start. And we're going to give you very specific tools. And then we're going to hop on Facebook, a private Facebook page, not this one, but a private Facebook page just for this challenge, just for participants of this challenge, so that you can be more personal in your questions, so that you will have myself and a coach every single day for 60 minutes at least to help you deal with overwhelm. We're just going to focus on overwhelm, just that one topic on Monday. The Facebook Live that day will be at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And if it's not there convenient for you to be there live, you can watch it later. It's going to be taped. And then Tuesday, what's the next challenge? Tuesday, it's moving beyond negative thoughts and bad moods. How many of you could relate to negative thoughts and bad moods sometimes, especially when you're overfunctioning and you're people pleasing and doing things that are stressing you out, or maybe something is upset you and you're just locked in. Like, and you can't get rid of that negative thought. Like, I'm no good. I'm a failure. I can't do it. Nobody cares. Why bother? We have those thoughts. I still have them. I'm sure, Jen, do you have them too?
Oh, yes.
All right. So I think we want to talk about this because I think so often we think if we were mature, if we were really godly, we wouldn't have those thoughts. We do have those thoughts, right? We're human. We have those thoughts. The question becomes, do we know how to deal with them? Do we know how to move beyond them? It's not that we're never going to have them. It's, do we have the tools to know how to process that so that we're moving beyond them so they don't capture and wreck our whole day or our whole life, right? How many of you struggled with negative thoughts your whole life because you don't know how to let go of them and get some peace and get a break from them? Right? Satan is the accuser. He's always accusing us. And so if we allow those thoughts to linger, we can have a pretty miserable life. And you know, people who are negative all the time, they're not happy people. And so how do we move beyond our negative thoughts and emotions? That will be day 2. And we'll do a Facebook Live on day 2 in our private Facebook page. And that challenge time will be at noon Eastern Time. Then Wednesday, how many of you have an amazing goal that you have been afraid to tackle because you might fail? So my podcast just started this week. And of course, it's already got failures in it because Apple isn't posting them yet. We gave them to Apple to post a week ago. They're still not. So you have to try something juicy and then something goes wrong and you can have all these negative thoughts and all these negative emotions of irritation and anger. How do you move beyond these things? And how do you not let the fear of failure stop you from doing what God calls you to do? Right? So fear of failure is big. And we've got to be able to tackle that if we're going to do what God calls us to do, because God doesn't ask us usually to do little teeny things. He sometimes asks us to do something scary and hard. And we might fail. When Esther went into the king, she didn't know what was going to happen. She just did what she was supposed to do, right? And God may ask us to do hard and scary things, but if we don't, because we're too caught by our emotion of fear and our negative thoughts, like I can't, and what if this doesn't turn out the way I want it to do, and we don't know how to move beyond that fear of failure, we're not going to be the God woman that God called us to be. So that will be Wednesday. You'll get an email in the morning. Here's how you do it. Let's practice some moving beyond fear of failure. Let's hop on our Facebook group at 7:30 p.m. that day on Wednesday, and let's talk about it for an hour. Thursday, we're going to talk about moving beyond unrealistic expectations. How many of you expect your husband to be faithful? How many of you expect your husband to tell you the truth? How many of you expect your mother to love you? Yeah, these are not unreasonable expectations, right? But they might be unrealistic. Looking at your mother or your husband, right? And yet we still have this hopium factor. We keep hoping that they're going to be different than they've shown us that they are. So how do we move beyond that without resentment? How do we move beyond unrealistic expectations? You'll get an email about that and some coaching around that day. And then Friday, we're going to take the mother load. How do we move beyond people pleasing? We've talked about it as a problem. We haven't talked about how to move beyond it, right? And there's some deep roots, because I told you, I knew how to say no. It wasn't a matter of, oh, I'm so afraid to say no. I'm not afraid to say no. I was just afraid to incur his criticism or his judgment or his disapproval or offend him or hurt his feelings. And I didn't know how to navigate that fear of man, of his reaction. And so I stayed small and silent and quiet and did what I knew was wrong, but I didn't have the guts to do what I knew how to do. So we're going to tackle that. How do we deal with that underlying fear? Fear of rejection, fear of someone being mad at us, fear of someone being disappointed, fear of someone complaining. Of course they're going to complain if we don't do what they want us to do. And they're going to manipulate, and they're going to try to do all kinds of things. So that's Friday. So we encourage you to sign up for this challenge. If you'd like to be a part, just go to leslievernick.com/challenge. And I'm going to tell you up front, there is a charge for the challenge. It's a low charge, but it's $17. And the reason we charge is because one year we had 5,000 people show up, and that was a big group of people, but not very many engaged. And so we just thought, we want you to be engaged. We only want you to sign up if you really want to work on this. And we really want to invest our time and our coach's time in helping you. And, $17 is not even a fraction of the cost of a coaching session or a therapy session for sure, but it will give you a lot of mileage that you would not have if you didn't participate and attend the Facebook Lives. So we just encourage you to give yourself a week of intensive care in these areas of stuckness, overwhelm, people pleasing, negative thoughts, negative emotions, fear of failure, and unrealistic expectations, so that you can hit the ground running in the second half of 2022, July through December, and feel like you are stronger and more stable and have the tools around your tool belt and know how to use them when these things come up. All right. Yes. We want to exercise faith and move forward. This sounds really good. I hope you sign up, Suzanne. Yeah, we have pity parties. I'm looking at some of the feed. Mm-hmm. So Jen, anything you want to say about the challenge? You were here last year for it, or anything about the overwhelm thing?
I'll speak to the challenge first. I love how the way you set this up, Leslie, it makes it so easy for people to kind of start to tackle something. So it's not it's not overwhelming to talk about being overwhelmed. It's really these little sound bites. It's such a small investment of our time, but worth so much that we can get back. That it really, to me, that's the power of coaching and everything that you share as well, is that it builds the momentum. So you may get these little hits of some sort of problem solving and faithful sort of tips as to how to overcome some of these things. And that'll just grow and escalate you into bigger and better things that might be troubling you in your life right now. So I love the way the challenge just kind of makes it short and sweet and gets the sparks going underneath us.
I love that. Sometimes we do need, sometimes when we tackle one area of our life. So someone was saying, I need help with overcoming loneliness. And loneliness is a result of other things, right? So loneliness is a result of some negative thinking, like nobody wants to hang out with me, or I'm too shy, or I can't do it. So you haven't put yourself out there to meet new people, or it's been hard to meet new people. And especially during COVID, there wasn't an opportunity to meet new people. I certainly get that, but it's over now. I mean, not COVID is over, but the isolation is over. People are getting out there. I just got back from Israel. Nobody wore masks, which was a relief, right? People want to see people's faces again. People do want to connect, and you can connect with others, but you might have some fears of overwhelm, it's too much, or I don't know how to do this, or negative thoughts, or unrealistic expectations, right? And so we want to help you. And I love how you said that, Jen, that each day you will get one action step. So it's not just a mindset shift. It is a mindset shift on some things, but there's an action step to go with it. And we want you to take that action step. And the sooner you take it before you come to the coaching group. So if you get the email on Moving Beyond Overwhelm on Monday morning, okay? And we're not just talking about overwhelm like right now, my cleaning lady is in Poland because her father's sick, and I haven't had my house cleaned over almost 8 weeks. And And I was like walking in my socks, and all of a sudden I look on the bottom of my feet. And although my floor doesn't look dirty, it is full of Arizona dust, and my feet were black. And so my house is a little overwhelming right now. It needs a good cleaning. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by that or in a negative mood. But we're not just talking about exterior stuff, house, closet, whatever's overwhelming. Your thoughts can be overwhelming. Like, I've got so many worries and so many things to do, and I don't even know where to start. But also our emotions can become overwhelming. We can become flooded with fear or anxiety or despair. And what do we do when we feel those feelings? And that's an important tool for you to know, especially in your life as a mom, because look at our children who don't know how to handle their feelings. We haven't instructed children on how to manage their overwhelm or their emotions. And if you don't know how to manage yours, and your husband doesn't know how to manage his, and your kids don't learn to manage theirs, then what's the world going to be like when we have a whole billion people who don't know how to learn how to manage their emotions, and they become overwhelmed with the slightest little dings in life and stressors? And that's what we see happening all over the place. And so it's really important that we learn how to do that and we practice it. And so having this opportunity to get one email with one action step on one category each day builds momentum on you feeling much more capable and competent of handling other things and tackling. So fear of failure may be a reason why we stay lonely, because I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid to put myself out there. I'm afraid to join an art class or a pickleball class or a Bible study or someplace where I might meet people and not be so lonely. So I'd highly encourage you to join this so that you even practice connecting with people in this small group environment, in the coaching sessions in our private Facebook page. And after the challenge is over, we're going to invite you to participate in very small group coaching classes to move beyond people pleasing, if that's a struggle for you in a depth kind of way. So this challenge is, I think, one of the comments that struck me the most last year was someone said at the end of this, "Oh my gosh, this has been the best $17 I have ever spent in my life," because she was all in, she did the work, and she saw the results at the end of the week. She felt better, and not only felt better, she felt stronger and more capable of managing things in her life. And that's what we want to help you do in the second half of 2022. All right. Any other questions that we have about moving beyond challenge? I'm going to go to my board here. Or any questions about overfunctioning? Do you feel like you understand what that is? And how many of you are going to stop doing that? The Bible tells us that we are to bear one another's burdens, right? So that makes us tempted to overfunction because, wow, they're carrying so many burdens, right? And so we do that. God calls us to do that. And then it also says, not too many verses after that, each one should carry their own load, right? So I want you to think right now in terms of our topic, overfunctioning. Are you carrying a load for someone who should be carrying their own load? Are you taking responsibility for something that's not yours to take? And we're not just talking about external things like kids' homework or kids' laundry or, but what if your mom expects you to be her one and only friend? And she's 80 years old and she expects you to call her every day. And she expects you to hang out with her. And she expects you to, make her life work because she's lonely and she's, living all by herself and she's dependent on you to create a life for her. Is that your job or is that her job? Can you be a good daughter and not feel resentful that you have to create a life for your mother that you don't know how to create because it's not your life, it's hers to create? Or do you feel like you have to create a life for your husband because he's not engaged with the kids or with you and you're stressing yourself out trying to overfunction for someone who doesn't want to pick up the reins of his own life? And if that's you, what can you do? What's one action step that you can do to begin to stop doing that? Or do you have a question about that? Andrea says this, there's a lot of pushback from those you are carrying when you stop overfunctioning. Absolutely. So let me give you something to say to them. Because when you say to them, hey, I'm going to stop functioning for you because you're not carrying your own load, that's going to go over like a lead of bricks, right? Leaded bricks. It's going to be not going to be good. right? Because you're going to be demeaned and criticized. Now, I'm not saying you won't be demeaned and criticized if you say it this way, but you'll feel better if you say it this way. And hopefully they'll get it. You're going to say something like this. Oh my gosh, kids. We'll just talk about kids first example. I have had a wake-up call. I have had a huge wake-up call. I've been making a huge mistake. I am so sorry. And they're going to be all ears, because when you don't blame them for you doing it and you don't make them feel bad for what you've done, they're going to listen. So even with your husband, I am so sorry. I realize that I have not been letting you step up to the plate and be the man, and I'm not talking about be the man and rule over everybody. I'm talking about, take care of yourself. You're an adult. You're perfectly capable of picking out your own clothes. I am so sorry that I've been telling you what to wear. That's not my job. It's your job. And I think that's embarrassing that I've had to, that you've had me pick out your clothes. If you want my opinion, please ask me, but I'm sorry. I won't do that anymore. Right. Or with your kids, I am so sorry. I thought I was being a good mom by doing all your wash and taking care of all of you. But my friend told me that her son's in college, and he thanked her today because he said, thanks, Mom, for making me do all my own wash. Because none of the other kids in college know how to do their wash, but I do. And I'm really glad I know how to do my wash because they're wrecking all their clothes. And I realized, hey, I've been doing all your wash and I need to stop doing that because you're not going to be equipped as an adult to take care of your own things. And that's part of owning what you did and why you're stopping without making them feel like they made you do it. Right? Well, Mom, I like you doing my wash. I'm sure you do. I'd like you doing my wash too. But a good mom isn't a mom who does everybody's stuff. A good mom is someone who equips her kids to live on their own. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'll teach you how to do your wash. That's what I can do. And I think these are ways that you can talk to people about what you can do and what you can't do and what they need to do for yourself, even your mom. Hey, Mom, I know you're lonely. And I've made some suggestions and you don't want to do that, but I can't fill all these hours for you. That's your job to fill. And I've made some suggestions. You don't want to do it. So I'm going to trust that you're smart enough to figure it out if you're lonely, that there are some things that you can do that don't need me to be a part of that, because I've got a life over here too that I have to live. And I can't just be available to be your friend 100% of the time. I love you, but I can't do that. And those are hard conversations, but they're not blaming or shaming conversations. They're just, this is reality. And I trust you that you know what to do to figure it out. And this is a common phrase I use with my adult kids. Jen, I don't know if your kids, how old are your kids?
Oh, 30, almost 32, 23, and 20.
Yeah, you look much younger than I am, but my kids are older too. And when my kids, kind of want me to figure it out, I just say, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're smart. I've raised you to be a smart person. You'll figure it out. And I just give it back to them, and if they want to discuss things, I'm willing to discuss, but I'm not going to solve their problem for them. Mm-hmm. Oh, Mom, I don't know what to do. I don't have a babysitter for the summer. Oh, wow, that's hard. I'm sure that's a struggle. What are some ideas you have? Well, I don't know. I was thinking maybe you could take them for the summer. Oh, I'm not thinking that's a good idea because I'm still working and I don't think I can take your kids for the summer. So those are discussions that you can have. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful. I'm sure you'll manage. That helps your kids feel like, wow, my mom trusts me that I can do this, that I'm equipped, that I don't need her to take care of me, that I can take care of myself and my own problems, right? So letting go of overfunctioning isn't just good for you. Mm-hmm. It's good for them. It empowers them. If you were still feeding your child or still wiping their butt or still brushing their teeth, not only would there be something wrong with your child, there would be something wrong with you, but you would be crippling your child. I'll never forget, Jen, once when I was counseling, I had a man who was about 40 years old and he lived with his mom. And he so hated her. I mean, he would have been probably one of those people who, if she got where she couldn't give him what he wanted, might kill her. He was so hateful of her because she crippled him. She crippled him so that he could not live alone and he could not live on his own. And he knew that. And yet he still depended on her. He still needed her to support him and pay his bills and do all the stuff. And he so resented it because he wasn't a man. He felt like a little boy inside. Mm-hmm. And he hated it. And he hated her for it. And so that's that love-hate relationship that you don't want to create with your kids.
No. And that's just a whole other level of toxicity, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier before we went live about, where does codependency, in your view, where does that fit in here?
Yeah, so this is a really good question, because codependency has such a broad and fuzzy definition. So this is kind of what I see as codependent. Codependent isn't necessarily an unhealthy relationship with someone else, but it's an absence of a relationship with yourself. So when you are so invested in fixing everybody else's life and you're not taking care of your own, that's a really unhealthy red flag to say you are getting something from being the savior of other people. And that's a codependent kind of thing. Like, I'm going to fix your life. He's an alcoholic. I'm going to fix your life, or my kid, or whatever. And I've got to be busy, being the therapist, being the helper, being the take care of, being the rescuer, being the enabler of everybody else's life. And my life, I have no idea what I think. I have no idea what I feel. I'm resentful. I'm exhausted. I have no time for me. That's a red flag that you're not just people pleasing. You are over functioning and you are enabling, and that you may actually be dependent on having that hero, I'm rescuing you role in order for you to feel good about yourself. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's so convoluted sometimes, and that's what I love about the challenge, is that, again, it breaks it down into little more manageable chunks so we can see where we might fit into this. Because I do believe we have all overfunctioned at times, or continue to do so. We are people pleasers, and I think there's a continuum there of codependency in all of us. And it's where we know in our lives that the tipping point is not healthy. And I think that's where all of this, the way you're describing it, and all the individual challenges of each day of the week coming up in 2 weeks, is going to be really phenomenal at helping us tease out what our own personal issues are that we can focus on, whether it be codependency, overfunctioning, or people pleasing, or all of the above.
Yeah. And I think, and maybe I would love to hear from you in the audience here. I think there is a particular struggle for Christian women in this place, that somehow the overfunctioning and people-pleasing role is a crown of virtue for the Christian woman, and not so much for the Christian man. Like my husband, I'll say to him, don't you feel guilty that you're not doing this? No. Like, don't you feel guilty when you're laying on the couch all Saturday afternoon when you're not feeling good? No. Like, if I were not feeling well, unless I was like deathly ill, if I just had a little cold, I would not be laying on the couch on Saturday afternoon. That's just because I would feel guilty. Like, I'm capable of doing something. I could still make dinner. I could still wash the dishes. I could still take care of the kids. Right. And so I think that is a kind of a guilt message of Christian women to overfunction and to feel guilty when you are wanting to steward yourself, even to go to bed on time. Well, I could get more done. I could get the dishes done. I could fold the wash. I could take care of my kids' homework. I could, make sure their book bags are all packed. I could make sure their lunches are all done. And therefore, I'm not going to go to sleep for an hour and a half later than I should have in order to get a good night's rest so that everybody else's life works smooth, right? And that's considered a good, godly mom. Instead of saying to your kids, make sure you got your book bags packed and your lunch made before you go to bed, right? Oh, it's not being a good mom. And so I think there's this good mom, good wife, good person, good church lady persona that we fight against or struggle with. And that when we don't fit that mold, we can either feel guilty or people can criticize us. Because I remember when the homeschool movement was really big, and every single person in my church that I was associated with was homeschooling their kids. None of them worked. I'm like, that's not for me. I'm not homeschooling my kids, and I kind of like to work a little bit. But it was not okay. I was not the good mom if I chose to not do all that. So I think there is this idolatry of performance and perfection and producing. And if you don't get everything done that day, you don't feel good about yourself. And I think there is this idolatry of that. That means nothing to God. God cares much more about your personhood. And so be careful of, accepting some of the world's standards, even the Christian worldview standards of who you should be and how you should function. And this over functioning and people pleasing. There's nothing wrong with people pleasing, and there's nothing wrong with giving and doing, even overdoing sometimes for a specific reason, when it's in someone's best interest for you to do so, right?
Mhm.
So my neighbor just had a stroke. If I have to go over there and gather things out of their house or mow their yard or whatever, I'm happy to do that, right? Or provide for that in some way. But if they're capable of doing that themselves, why would I be over there doing that for them, right? So I think that's where you have to discern, and that's using that discernment meter instead of feeling run by fear. We're motivated by love, right? Even when it costs us. And there's a big difference there.
Mhm. And I was thinking too, as you were talking, back to like, I used to actually, believe it or not, I used to thank God in my prayers. I would thank him for giving me sinusitis every year. And like, I kind of laugh about it now, but that's not funny. Like, I was so sick. Every March, I would get sinusitis like clockwork, bedridden the whole bit, because it's a cold times a million, right? Fever in the whole bit, and just cold, total like lethargy. And I used to be grateful because I knew it was the only break I would get in my life. It was my one time I was allowed to stay in bed for 4 days or whatever the length of the illness was.
Because you would allow yourself, or because other people would not nag you?
I think it was me. It wasn't my family. It was my perception of what my family needed from me. So I would overfunction, overdo, do all the crazy birthday parties while working 60 hours a week, while doing this, while everything, right? Because I thought that was the good mom, that was the wife, that was the Christian woman's role.
Yeah.
And I would welcome getting sick as an excuse to just chill for 4 days.
Yeah.
And I honestly, Leslie, and I'm a nurse by background, and so I knew it was unhealthy, but it took my wake up call, as we've described earlier, to go, oh my gosh, what an unhealthy way to think, that I'd actually wish illness upon myself in order to get a rest.
Instead of just saying no. Instead of just saying,
yes,
I'm done for today. I'm done for today. I'm done with my labors, and it's time to do something else. And I think this is so important, ladies, that, we somehow wear this badge of honor, that if we're exhausted and busy and depleted and, ready to tear our hair out, that we've had a good day, that somehow that's been a virtuous day. And, Proverbs 31 has been held up as an example. She did this and she did this and she did this and she did this. Those were just examples of her agency, I think. So in a culture where women had no power or no agency, really, I think it's showing a lot of her power and agency. She made her own decisions. She made her own money. She had her own influence. She had her own friends. She made her own clothes. She looked beautiful. She cared about how she looked, right? And so the qualities of the Proverbs 31 woman, where it says strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future unafraid, are character qualities of the ideal godly woman. Instead of being exhausted and depleted and worn out and resentful and guilty and pressured, that's not God's idea for us or his ideal. And yet somehow we've bought into this bill of goods, both from our culture and from our churches, that somehow if we're that way, we must be extra godly. We must be extra godly. And don't buy it. It's not true for a minute. You're just busy. You're just busy. And that doesn't mean you're godly at all. In fact, you probably aren't, because you're crabby and tired on top of it. So I want to go to some questions. We have a couple questions that came in. If anybody has any other questions, could you put it in the chat? The chat moves too fast for me to catch the questions and look in the camera at the same time. I like to look in the camera instead of reading the chat while I'm talking. And so I have my assistant who kind of pulls out the questions from the chat. So if you have questions either about the challenge that we're starting on Monday, June 20th, we'll run it for 5 days. It's $17. You have to sign up. We're not going to send you an email about the channel unless you've signed up. You're not going to get access to the private Facebook page unless you've signed up, because we want to make sure that the people who sign up are really interested and really want to do this with us. All right. We're putting our skin in the game for an hour a day, 2 coaches into the Facebook Live, and we really want to help you. We'll answer your questions. We'll help you where you get stuck. And that's why it's so important for you to do the homework before the challenge Facebook Live, if you can, so that if you do the homework and you say, I tried this and I did this, but here's where I got stuck, then we can use that coaching hour to help you get unstuck so that you can make more progress, right? And that's our goal each day. So the question is pride at the center of this? Is pride at the center of overfunctioning? It can be. It can be. Like somehow the more I do, the better I am. And I think there is this idea pride causes to us to have. And it causes, and Jen and I have talked about this on my team as the coaches. When we're coaching people, our job is not to be the hero of your story, right? And it's tempting. Like somebody comes to us as a coach and they're a mess and they've got all kinds of problems. And it's very easy to think, oh, we have the answer and just do this. And here's what we can do to help you. And this is what you need to do. And kind of be the hero of your story. But that's not going to work, because the goal is for you to become the hero of your own story.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think as a mom or a wife or a friend that you've got to be the hero of someone else's story, you've got to rescue them out of alcoholism, you've got to rescue them out of their passive aggressive behavior, you've got to rescue them out of their diabetes or their abusive behaviors or their childhood wounds, you can't. Even if you wanted to rescue your children out of their bad mood, they often don't let you, right? They don't even want the help. They're just, my little granddaughter has a tude sometimes, and I'm like, what's wrong? And you can try to help them and they don't want to be helped, because it's their responsibility to learn how to manage their own moods. It doesn't mean you can't care, but you can't be the hero of someone else's story. And so when you think you can, or you believe you should, there is an element of pride, like somehow I have the answers that you don't, or I have the wisdom that you don't. And I think that we all have wisdom. We all have wisdom. But I think our job as helpers with one another is to help us find our own wisdom, help us find God's wisdom, not to say, oh, I have this wisdom, do this, right? But to bring out the wisdom and the strengths that each person has, that God has given them and God has equipped them with, so that they can write their story and be the hero of their story. And I don't mean the hero above God. God equips us to write an amazing life story. God says, I have called you that you would have life, and life to the fullest, abundant life. Doesn't mean an easy life, but it means a full and meaningful life. And it doesn't mean that you put the cape on and start being superwoman of everybody's story. It means that you live your life well and you do your work to be the person that God calls you to be, not fixing everybody else's life. Jesus didn't fix everybody else's life. He helped people who couldn't fix things. And he also called them to do their own work, right? Even the man who was at the well paralyzed in John chapter 4, he said to them, do you want to be well? He didn't just come in and swoop in and fix them. Why haven't you done what you could do? Oh, no, nobody's putting me in the water, right? He challenged them a little bit. Like, hey, do you really want to get well? Because I can heal your legs, but you've got some issues inside. You're going to have to walk and get a job and meet people on eye-to-eye level now. Do you want to do that? Do you want to mature into an adult life instead of a crippled's life? Those are hard questions, but he didn't just fix his life. The man had to fix his life, even though Jesus fixed his legs, right? And he asked him, you sure you want to go there? So this is really important, that we not overfunction. Jesus didn't overfunction, do for people what they needed to do for themselves. And sometimes when we ask God to kind of swoop in and fix our life, God is saying, I've given you what you need to fix your life. I've given you everything you need for life and godliness. Do the work. You've got work to do to mature and to grow. All right. So is pride at the center of this? Yeah, oftentimes it is. Sometimes pride and shame are the same thing. So if you find yourself in a lot of shame about yourself, sometimes it's because you beat yourself up because you failed to live up to your prideful version of yourself. Like, I should be perfect, and I'm shamed that I couldn't get it all done, or I didn't get it all done, or someone didn't like me because I didn't fix it for them and they criticized me and now I feel shame. But that kind of shame is the inversion of pride. Like, I want it to be about me. I want to be perfect. I want to do it right. I want you to love me. I want you to say, yay, you're the hero of my story. And when you don't give me that, I feel that shame, but it's really the inverse of the pride that I wanted to fulfill. Okay. Will I have homework helps and books to suggest to continue to work on these things after the week is over? We will have homework helps for sure. We may suggest some books. I haven't thought about that, but that's a good idea. Personally, I don't think that reading a book will make a big life change. I think what makes a life change is when you get something to do differently and you do it. Right? So I would be probably a little hesitant to say, hey, here's a book on Overwhelm, or here's a book on this, read it and you'll be better. How many books have you read and still stayed the same, including the Bible? Right? And so I think that we need more experiential learning than just head knowledge. And I think again, I don't mean to be critical of the churches. There's some amazing churches today, but I think in my earlier experience of Christianity, it was a lot of, if you know the truth, if you know it, somehow you'll be able to live it. And that didn't work for me. I knew it and I still didn't live it very well. And so I think we need more, how do we move it from here to embody it in our lives? And I don't think a book can teach you how to do that. I think connection with others help you do that.
And I think the action steps every day of the challenge will help create that experience that we have to put into practice, right?
Yeah. My pastor gave some great advice this last week. He was talking about knowing God and maturing. And he said, you may feel immature, like you don't know enough about the Bible or you don't know enough about it. And he goes, there's lots of people who know tons about the Bible who are still very immature and mean, cruel people, right? So it's not about knowing more information. That's kind of the desire for more knowledge that got Adam and Eve into trouble right at the beginning. So his advice is this: if you want to grow, read a chapter for 5 minutes in the Bible. Read one chapter for 5 minutes. And then for the next 5 minutes, review what you just read and ask the Holy Spirit, what do you need to put into practice? And then put it into practice that day. And I think that is part of what we're going to be doing during this challenge is, where are we? What's one thing are we going to put into practice? And then we're going to put it into practice. And as we put it into practice, you're going to see the results of that right away, which then motivates you to put more things into practice, right? And so that's how we really learn. It's not by just learning about what we need to put into practice, but it's actually putting it into practice and experiencing what that feels like. Okay. So I don't know that there will be homework. There'll be an email every day that you will get action steps. Try this, 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 this. Come to the Facebook group. Let's see where you got stuck. Oh, let's do this. Let's tweak it here. Let's go here. How does that feel? What does that feel like when you do that? All right. And so that you get that experience of, like I do feel better. Or, I don't think the same way I thought before. Or I was able to let it go. How did that happen? Well, we did this, this, this. Okay. And so now you see that some of these action steps bear fruit. And now you can practice them some more so that you can grow. I am guilty of codependency. How do you start getting your own plans in your own life? It's overwhelming for me and very fearful of being without their needs. That's a really great question. And we'll be talking some about that during the challenge. But Jen, do you want to tackle that a little bit, where she might start?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you even posting that question. And I think it's a great place to start just by acknowledging that. So that's a huge first step, because I think somewhat similar, someone had posted in the chat earlier too about what can I do to prepare for this challenge. So kind of like this, it's like, how do you get started? Well, you get started by acknowledging, and you recognize, and you open yourself up, as Lori talks about, not Lori, Leslie talks about in walking in core strength, for example, we open ourselves up to the Holy Spirit and to wise others. And so just by showing up and listening to your sisters in Christ and listening to the coaches and Leslie talk about this kind of stuff is really one of those first steps. It's just being open and willing to hear that there needs to be a shift. And for you to acknowledge the fact that it's fearful for you to be without their needs. I could feel that as I read that, like it was piercing for me, because that's like something being ripped from you is how I experience it when I read it that way. So I don't know if that's what it's like for you, but it's a way to kind of dig deep into what's really behind that. Who are you? What will you be without those needs, like as part of your life anymore? And I think just slowly starting to tackle some of that stuff would be really, really helpful. And it's kind of, as Leslie said, it's exciting a little bit, because it gives us, when something's different and we're infusing something new, it gives us hope. And so that's how I see this going forward. What about you?
Yeah, I do too. And I think, change only begins when we start becoming aware that we need to change. And then how to change is more of the process of it. And someone in the chat was asking, like, what is experiential learning? And so I'm going to give you an example. So if you were to want to learn to cook and you watched the cooking show, you would learn informational truth, right? So you learned, okay, I saw how they put the spices in the pan. I saw how they heated the pan. I saw that they cut the chicken. I saw that they did that, but I didn't experience doing any of it. I just watched it being done, right? So I know what that looks like. but I've never done it. So if that, how likely are you to repeat that in your own kitchen? But what would be different if a chef came into your kitchen with the chicken and the spices and said, okay, here's the knife, cut the chicken here. And you cut the chicken there. And then he said, no, here's where you need to break that bone. So you missed the spot here, go here and cut it a little bit better. Oh, okay, here it cuts really easy here. I didn't have to cut through the whole bone. There's a joint here that helps me to cut right through here. I didn't know that. Ooh, now I know how to cut a chicken. I never cut a chicken before. Now I know how to flour a chicken and stick it in the pan. And what's braising? Oh, this is braising. It goes this hard. It's this hot. This is what it smells like. Oh, so now you're having an experience of learning how to cook. How much more likely will you do to cut a chicken again all by yourself? By watching it, by reading about it in a book, or by having someone show you how to knit, how to cook, how to paint, how to think, how to move past a negative emotion, how to tune into your body to see what your body is telling you and how to process that through. Those are the things that we talk about experiential learning. We hear about it, but we don't actually know how to do it. And that's what we think is much more profound in terms of learning experiences. So that's what we're going to be trying to do in this challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not going to be able to be in your living room and cut the chicken, but we are going to give you those experiences of what does it feel like to notice that the things that I'm thinking may not be true. I never even paid attention to that before. Well, how do you pay attention to that? Mm-hmm. We have to pay attention and to know how to do that, right? Just like you need to know how to cut a chicken, and you don't want to be struggling over trying to cut through a bone when you know there's a little joint that just pops it right off, right? And so that's the difference. Yeah, kinesthetic learning works. Yeah, mm-hmm. for sure. Okay. One of the things that I would just add to this, how do I get started? Is I would start doing an exercise. Here's an exercise that I'm going to give you just right now. And I would like all of you to try it and come back at our next Facebook Live and give us some feedback. Just spend 2 minutes every day asking yourself 2 questions. Just close your eyes, take a deep breath, go inside and say, what did I do today, or what happened today that made me feel most alive? Mm. All right. So what happened today, or what did I do today that made me feel most alive? And then the second question is, what happened today, or what did I do today that made me feel most flatlined? Now, there's no right or wrong answer, but the answers are insightful. So answers over time will give you some idea of who you are and where you are, right? So if you say, what made me feel alive is when I got complimented, when everybody praised me for helping them, and when everybody thought I was wonderful. And, then you can say, wow, my self-esteem and my self-worth is really dependent on other people's voices in my life. And I feel most alive when they're telling me I'm alive, but there's no core to me, right? In fact, I feel most depleted when people are criticizing me and people are telling me they don't like something I did. And so those are really helpful things for you to find what's kind of at the core. But you might find I feel most alive when I'm able to read for 5 minutes. I feel most alive when I'm taking my walk in nature and I'm hearing the birds sing. I feel most alive when my house is clean and there's quiet and there's beauty around me, and I love looking at nature and looking out the window and seeing the sunset. So those would be little things that would help you see what brings life to your soul, mm-hmm. and what's depleting you besides your producing, right? And see, just pay attention to what stirs you. Okay. Do you have any advice for over-functioning in a marriage where the other partner has ADHD? Any thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking about it in terms of, because I don't have experience living with anyone with ADHD, but it kind of just brings me back to what you were talking about earlier, Leslie, with your sister. Is it your sister-in-law, your brother-in-law's mm-hmm. heart attack? Mm-hmm. And there's a season where you have to take on a certain role because the other person isn't capable. So I don't know what the functionality of this person that you're referring to, your husband, or your spouse, but I'm sure there is some give and take there where it is appropriate that there might be some things that they aren't able to do for themselves. But that would be a dialogue, I think, between you. And I think if you recognize that it is something that they can do for themselves and that you've been doing it, then it's over functioning. And there's a call for you to understand it within yourself. What is that feeding in you to take on that role? And do you need to stop? And how do you go about stopping it? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of up to you and the dynamic in the relationship, I think.
Right. And we'll cover this a little bit in Unrealistic Expectations. So if you were married to someone who was a paraplegic, there might be some household responsibilities like mowing the grass that you would have to do. That's not over-functioning because they're not capable of doing that. And it would be unrealistic for you to expect them to mow the grass because they don't have the agency to do that, right? So then you have to decide, can I do that? And am I willing to do that without resentment? And if I'm resentful of that, what does that look like? On the other hand, someone may be just a couch potato and not feel like mowing the grass. And then you're out mowing the grass, right? So ADHD is a little bit unclear, is what is he not capable of doing and what does he just not feel like doing? Because from my understanding of ADHD, they can be very good at doing whatever they feel like doing and wanting to do, right? It's just a matter of getting them motivated to do it, right? They can be very focused when it's in their interest to do so, and they ignore everything else. And I'm not an expert in ADHD, so I might have a conversation with my husband saying, these are the responsibilities that we need to cover as a couple, whether they be household responsibilities or financial responsibilities or children responsibilities or whatever. Mm-hmm. And within your wheelhouse of strengths, what are the responsibilities do you think you can take? And then let him take them. And unless you want to take them because they're your strengths as well, but have that conversation, because when you focus on the weaknesses of someone and then just feel resentful that you have to cover for them, they might have a lot of strengths that they can take from you that would work for both of you. That, hey, I can take over the budget, or I can take over, this part of the house, or this part of, responsibilities for household stuff, and you can take over some other things. And so I think having that discussion with the awareness of they may be forgetful. ADHD does make people forgetful. They don't. So do I have permission to remind you of things that you've committed to? Is that a good help for you? Can that be a helpmate? Or what can you do to make sure you don't forget things that are important? Right? Because if you have a disability, let's say I'm colorblind. All right, let's say I'm colorblind. And so I know I'm colorblind. So if I have that disability that I'm going to mismatch my clothes, if I'm doing something important, you better bet I'm going to ask my husband, does this match? Or I'm going to call my girlfriend and go on Zoom. Does this look all right? Because I'm colorblind. I don't really know what colors I'm wearing. Does this go together? And so when someone has a disability that they're willing to admit to and own in humility, like we all have something, right? I'm not good at math, or I'm not good at computers, or whatever we're not good at. And to be able to say, I'm not good at that. Can you help me in this area? And I can overcompensate for you in those areas where you're not good at or you need help in. That's the give and take of most relationships. But I don't think that we should treat someone as if they're not capable when they are capable. They just might not be motivated. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think ADHD is a piece of not capable, and some of it is not motivated, but there is medication that they can take that will help them be more focused and less forgetful and more on task. And so those are things that somebody may have to do in order to function in a family life or a work environment in a better way. Okay. How about if someone tells you constantly that you are not doing anything right? Anything you would say to her, Jen?
Yeah, my heart just goes out to her. And it's so hard not to hear those words and to have them pierce your heart. And so what I would love for you to do is have the ability to just picture how God sees you and to put on that armor of God so that you can kind of protect yourselves from those hurtful comments. Maybe reflect on any part of truth that's in that so you can learn and grow. Absolutely. But at the same time, if it's constant criticism, then you need to be able to protect yourself from something like that so that you can have a chance to flourish, as opposed to always using your energy to kind of do this all the time. So my heart really does go out to you for that. Now, how it fits into overfunctioning, I don't know. I'm going to take a leap here and suggest that because they're constantly feeding that into you, that you keep doing more and more and more, hoping to please them. And it's probably, I'm guessing, a never ending battle. It's never good enough if that's the type of person that's constantly criticizing you. I don't know. Your thoughts, Leslie?
I would say this, this is a kind of a really important moment, because who gets to define what's right? Right? So you're not washing the dishes right. In other words, what he's saying is you're not doing it the way I would do it. You're not doing it the way my mother did it. You're not doing it the way I think you should do it. That's what he's really saying. Because who can define in most areas what's really the right way to brush your teeth or clean the house or make dinner or wash the dishes or whatever he's criticizing you for, right? So he's got his idea of how it should go, and you're not doing it his way. So it's a tactic of control. Like, I want you to do it my way, and that's the only way that is right, or that's the only way you'll get my attention or my approval. So this is a battleground for you, because for you to kind of acquiesce and do everything his way is to say, you don't have anything to contribute. You're just the object to fulfill his desires, to do everything his way. And that will end up harming you in the long run. So I think it might be helpful for you to sit back and kind of ask yourself, does he have valid suggestions about how I might improve how I do things? And do I want to make adjustments in washing the clothes or doing the laundry or whatever I'm not doing right? Or do I kind of like my way of doing things? It works for me, right? It may not be his way of driving the car. It may not be his way of putting our bills in the checkbook, or whatever you do. It may not be his way, but your way works. It's not like you're getting overdraft notices or getting lots of negative consequences. Your kids aren't getting food poisoned by the way you cook, or all those kind of things. And so it might be to begin to ask some curious questions, like, what do you mean by right? Or does it always have to be your way in order for it to be right? Can't my way be right too? Can we both be right sometimes? Can there be other ways of doing things besides your way? Those would be opportunities for you to be a good helpmate to him by inviting him to self-reflect on these arrogant statements that my way is the only way that's right. And he may not be saying that on purpose with a maliced heart. He may be just saying it because his father said it to his mother, and he's used to having it be done his way. And so despite inviting those questions without rancor, if you can ask them with a gentle spirit and saying, I'm curious, why do you think your way is always the right way and my way is always the wrong way? That may cause him to press pause and say, I never thought about it that way. I'm just trying to help you improve. Well, why do you think that I need to improve my dishwashing techniques? And I'm using that particular example because my friend's husband would do this to her all the time. And she finally just had to say, like, what makes you think your way is always right? And it was kind of an eye opener and an opportunity for him to grow into a more compassionate, open person, that his way wasn't always right. It's just that he always thought it was right. And this goes back to our second date challenge. We have thoughts about things, all kinds of thoughts, like, my way is always right. You should do it my way. Your way is wrong. Are those thoughts really true? And until we are able to actually look at those thoughts and say, is this really right? Is this really true? We can't change them, right? We can't change them. Just like we might say to ourselves, like I said to myself in college, oh, I can't write a dissertation. I could never get my PhD. I'm not smart enough. Those were my negative thoughts. Now, I didn't think they were negative. I just thought they were true. I just thought they were the facts. I don't know how to do this. I could never finish a PhD because I don't know how to write. Well, guess what? I do know how to write, or I learned how to write. I wrote 7 books, but I told myself I couldn't. And that was a negative, limiting belief that I never in a million years ever even gave it a second thought as this might not be true. Right. And so I would challenge you, whether your husband evaluates his beliefs or not, you don't have to take his thoughts as yours. Oh, I'm not doing it right because he says so. Maybe you're doing it better than him. Maybe you're doing an excellent job of things. So here's where we have to not let someone else define our value or our worth, right? They may give us feedback and we can look at it and say, is it true? Is it not true? Do I is this feedback helpful? When I got, criticisms on my book and red ink and all that, I'd have to look at it and say, do I want to change it this way or do I like it better this way? I had to decide, right? This was someone's opinion. And sometimes it was good and I liked it. And sometimes it was like, this really loses the essence of what I want to say. Nope, I'm not taking this feedback, right? And so this is part of you growing and maturing through this nagging adversity in your life of your husband telling you everything that you do isn't right, and begin to grow yourself and perhaps invite him to grow as well, that maybe he's not always the expert on everything. All right. Is there hope for a 73-year-old widow? Absolutely. God used Anna the prophetess. God used older women in the Bible. I'm ending my decade of the 60s this next year. And so I hope God isn't done with me. I've got a lot left to give, and I hope you do too. So it's not too late to grow, too late to change, too late to begin to say, wow, I don't want to die never knowing the woman that I could have become, because I was too scared to grow. I was too scared to put my toe in the water. I was too scared of failure. And that's why it's so important that you sign up for this challenge, because it's not a big commitment of, years of therapy. I'm not asking you to read a 200-page book. I'm asking you to read a 5-minute email every day. I'm asking you to pay $17 to put some skin in the game and to show up to our 1-hour Facebook coaching sessions for 1 week, And you get all that for $17, which is a very low cost, but it's something that makes me feel better about you having more skin in the game and committing so that you'll actually do the work, because I want you to succeed. I don't want you to sign up. Oh, I signed up for another thing that I never went to. How many things do you sign up for, Jen, that you never go to?
Yeah.
I do too. I do too. Well, that sounds good. I'll sign up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll sign up. But the things I pay for, I tend to show up for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just using psychology with you guys. Maybe I should have charged $57. I don't know, but I'm just charging $17. But I'm just saying that the things I tend to pay for, I tend to show up for. I tend to invest a little bit more into, because I put my money there. So we're just using some psychology to get you more progress than you would get if you just signed up and you never showed up. All right. So we would love to see you there. If there's somebody here who absolutely doesn't have $17 for a whole week of help, please let us know. But we really want you to be a part of this challenge. And so we encourage you to go to leslievernick.com/challenge so that you can be a part of this challenge. It starts next Monday, not next Monday, but the Monday after, the 20th of June. And we would love to see you there. All right. I don't see any other questions. So we'll call it wrap for tonight. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks, Jen, for
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you. I don't know when our next Moving Beyond, I don't know when our next Facebook Live is. Do you know when that? Let me just check when it is.
I'm on Friday. I know that.
Okay, so we're doing something Friday. Let me just get my calendar up and I'll tell you when we're doing it next. So our next, we're doing a Moving Beyond People Pleasing Facebook Live at noon Eastern time on Friday. And the topic will be, why do we say yes to everything and everyone? So it's sort of a segue of what we're talking about today. So we're going to do something on Friday, and then we'll do another Moving Beyond People Pleasing Facebook Live on Monday, the 13th. And that will be, how do I recover from rejection? So we've kind of touched on that a little bit of rejection, like my stuff isn't good enough. I'm not good enough. You're not happy that I said no. How do we deal with rejection? How do we handle that? Because studies have now shown that rejection is as painful as physical harm, that it hurts our bodies and our hearts. So it's very painful. And how do we move beyond that? How do we move past it? So we'll give you some tools on that. So stay tuned to your emails from us, because we're going to be having some Facebook Lives all week on these different topics. And then we'll move into our challenge where we're going to go all in on one topic for the tools for you to move beyond those 5 things. All right?
Yeah,
all right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.